Yes, yes, yes. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening to one and all, wherever you are in the world. This is the Night Flight Show, the third in the series. For those of you who are unfamiliar with the concept, it's pretty easy to pick up, but there was a DJ back in the days on a radio station in London called Choice FM. It no longer exists. But the DJ was called Commander B, and he had a show called The Night Flight. And so I kind of borrowed that concept, all right? And as you'll see from the visuals, well, fasten your seatbelts. We'll be taking off shortly for the night flight. And the theme of these shows is whatever you guys want to talk about. Doesn't have to be boxing related, although it can be. We can talk about movies, life, dating, video games, ancient mysteries, music, whatever you guys want to talk about. So, I'd like to shout out everybody in the live chat. We got June Sports, we got Declan McKenna, we got First Round Boxing, we got Adam Asbury, Joshua Hooker, Felix Navarrete, Anthony YouTube, G-Man Big Up, Simon Jones, JR. JR says Hatman built the pyramids. Fact. Well, I'm old enough, right? I'm old enough to have built the pyramids. Simon Jones needs to cut out the zesty talk. June Sports says, did you see Magazine Dreams? Magazine Dreams? No, is that a movie? I haven't seen it. Tell me about it. Somebody says, you know, it was Luis Ortiz that built the pyramids. You know, we're in the same age bracket. A bodybuilding movie? No, I haven't seen that. I'm not interested in bodybuilding. So it's not the kind of movie I would attempt to watch. Declan McKenna, excuse me. Declan McKenna says, Hatman, do you ever worry about CTE from boxing? No, I wasn't boxing long enough to be worrying about CTE. You know, boxing's an amateur. You only box 3 rounds. I didn't have hundreds of amateur fights. I did spar quite a bit, but no, I'm not at all concerned about CTE from boxing. I didn't take enough punishment to be worried about any of that. At least I don't think so. We'll find out in due course, right? But yeah, I don't expect to have any issues with it. G-Man says, did you see Lawrence Okolie's birthday message to Dylan White? Okolie is low-key hilarious now. Yeah, I saw your video, G-Man. I watched your video. And I heard the quote from Lawrence Okolie, and he is hilarious now. He was hilarious at the press conference with React Poor. He's been saying loads of funny stuff in his deadpan fashion. That's what makes it funny, is Lawrence Okolie says this stuff with a straight face. He's totally deadpan. that just makes it more amusing. So yeah, I saw your video, G-Man. Highly entertained. The 286 Project says, who are your favorite film directors? At the moment, I would say Chris Nolan. He's one of the only Hollywood directors that still makes movies now that are any good, in my view. Shout out to Outmatch. Long time, bro. All good, all good. Hopefully you're doing well as well. I guess you've been on your grind and doing life. So how's things, Outmatch? Joshua Hooker says, not even Pumping Iron, that was a great documentary. No, that's the Arnold Schwarzenegger one, right? No. I don't want to watch anything about bodybuilding, bros. It just doesn't interest me. But yeah, favorite movie directors. Let me think now. Scorsese definitely in his prime. He doesn't make good movies anymore. I've spoken about this in the past with regards to the creative juices pause. As a rapper, as a lyricist, I found that I was far more creative in my 20s. And as I've gotten older, my creativity gets less. I mentioned the fact that my creativity used to come in waves, like musical creativity. These waves of creativity, which would come back in the days, maybe every few weeks. Now it's like, if I get a wave of creativity once a year, I'm doing well. And so Martin Scorsese, yeah, his movies are just turned to garbage now. Like, The Irishman was rubbish. The last time he made a good movie, I don't know. But yeah, back in the days, definitely Scorsese. One of my favorite movies of all time. And my favorite Scorsese movie is not one that most people would expect. Most people would say Goodfellas or Casino. Maybe even Mean Streets. But for me, my favorite Scorsese movie is Gangs of New York. So yeah, Scorsese's definitely one of them. Francis Ford Coppola made some great films, obviously. Apocalypse Now, we spoke about that on a previous Night Flight. The Godfather films. Be Seeing You says Kubrick is the man life affirming. Kubrick's movies are very interesting. But in my view, at least for my taste, they're not always particularly compelling, but they're always interesting. Like 2001: A Space Odyssey is an interesting movie, but it doesn't have particularly engaging characters. It's just more so the concept and the cinematography, the special effects for the time when it came out was spectacular. But Stanley Kubrick, Full Metal Jacket was a great film. That's one of my favorite Stanley Kubrick films because the acting is very engaging. There's Eyes Wide Shut, of course. What's the one with, what's his name now? I can't remember the black and white one about the crazy dictator guy. That one's quite funny. Yeah, there's A Clockwork Orange, which is a very weird film. The Shining, yeah, that's an interesting film. And I've heard a theory about The Shining, which I can share with you guys now. Dr. Strangelove, thank you, 286 Project. Dr. Strangelove, starring, what's the actor's name? He's a British actor. Can't believe I've forgotten his name. He's hilarious. He was also in Lolita, which was another Kubrick film, right? Which was real dodgy. Real dodgy. Peter Sellers, thank you. Yeah, Peter Sellers was literally hilarious. But yeah, there's a theory about The Shining that is actually a movie about some type of MK Ultra mind control project where basically these people like Jack and his family are brought into the mind control project, and all of the things that appear to be ghosts are actually real people, they're actors. And what they're doing is they're trying to make Jack go crazy and therefore kill his family. So it's some kind of weird MK Ultra type mind control project. And one of the pieces of evidence that people have used to substantiate this theory is that there was a government base in America, which I think was overlooking LA. Don't quote me on this. I forget which state it was in now. But it was called Lookout Mountain. And it was alleged that there was a bunch of like MK Ultra type experiments that went on at Lookout Mountain. And in the movie The Shining, the hotel where Jack and his family stay is called the Overlook. And if you look at the original hotel which stood on the site of Lookout Mountain, because Lookout Mountain was a military base, but before that there was a hotel there. The hotel looks very similar to the hotel in The Shining. So that's one of the bits of evidence. But it's very interesting because it is kind of a perplexing film. And, The Shining is very different to the book. That's why Stephen King didn't like it. And Stephen King actually made his own version of The Shining. I think it came out in the 90s, which was terrible. Any of you guys seen the Stephen King version? Kayvon Green says, no way, the movie is based on a King book. Yeah, and because it's based on a King book, it doesn't mean it can't be based on the book, or aspects of what Kubrick put in there can't be based on MK Ultra. Because as Solid Snake pointed out, A Clockwork Orange, which is another Stanley Kubrick film, was also based on MK Ultra. So it's something that Stanley Kubrick had made a film about before, and or after, which came for after, yeah, no, before, yeah, Clockwork Orange was before The Shining, I think, unless I got it muddled up. But yeah, Stephen King hates The Shining, and his version of the film was terrible. I mean, it was shocking. Absolutely shocking. I think it came out in the 90s. It was so bad, a lot of people don't even realize it exists. Outmatch says, all good here, bro. Just chipping away, currently in the work, train, home rut. I hear you. Black Dynamite says, have you seen Dogville? I haven't. But speaking of dogs, I like folklore and mythology. I find it interesting. And so there is a movie based on some British, European folklore. It's a British movie called Dog Soldiers. I actually saw it when it came out at the cinema. And so in Britain, in British folklore, there is a long history of very anthropic dogs, right? Dogs which are like half man, half dog, giant wolf type man creatures, going back many, many centuries into maybe prehistory. And Dog Soldiers uses that mythology to base a modern film on. Yes, Dog Soldiers. Debiaka's seen it. Yep. Copezilla, he's seen it too. Is it Posahula? I'm not sure how to pronounce your name, but yeah, he's seen it too. Big up Mr. Luca in the chat. He says the King version was a mini-series. I don't think it was a mini-series. Pretty sure it was a standalone movie. I could be wrong, but for example, with It, which was another Stephen King, based on a Stephen King book, the original that came out was actually a mini-series in America. But when it was released in the UK, they stitched because it was only a two-parter, right? It's like a two-part mini-series. They stitched it together in the UK and made it one movie, It. So perhaps they did that with Stephen King's version of The Shining as well. I'm not sure. But all I can tell you is it's terrible. Goofy indeed. Terrible. Be Seeing You says, have you watched the Prisoner TV series? No, I don't watch many TV series. Gayon says it was in two parts. So like It then. Because, It was originally a mini-series, but then it was kind of like released as a movie in Britain. Like you used to be able to go to Blockbusters or your video store and just rent It as a movie, in one part. Shout out to Kayvon Green for the super chat. He says, with the crisper dire wolves, we might have Dog Soldiers soon. Yeah, I saw the story about the dire wolves. Apparently, they're not really dire wolves. They've just tinkered slightly with the genetics of a grey wolf to match a tiny amount of the genome of dire wolves, a very small amount. But they were particular genes which they thought would produce characteristics that are unique to the dire wolf, right? So they think that they've gone in and got the most crucial genes or whatever, they've done the most crucial DNA edits, right? I'm not even using the correct scientific language here. I'm not a geneticist, but they've gone in there and done the most, according to them, crucial DNA edits that will produce physical characteristics that were most unique to the direwolf. But yeah, I've seen them and all that, but genetically, they're basically just grey wolves. They're far more closely related genetically to grey wolves than direwolves. But yeah, I've seen that thing and that story. But shout out to Kayvon Green. Shout out to Nathan for the super chat. He says, Hatman, who you got? Crawford versus Mayweather and Crawford versus Pacquiao. I think I've got... It's very tough, you know, but I might go Mayweather over Crawford. Maybe. Crawford actually has a longer reach, but Mayweather's like a sharper puncher. I'm not talking about bigger puncher. I just mean like his shots come out more sharp and fast and crisp. I don't know. I'm really torn on Mayweather versus Terence Crawford. I'm very, very torn on that fight. One day I might tell you Mayweather and another day I might tell you Crawford, but I'm very torn on that one. As far as Crawford-Pacquiao, I'll pick Terence Crawford all day over Pacquiao. All day. Styles make fights, and that's how I would go for that one. Cobezilla says, I hate that everything, but shout out to Nathan for the super chat. Cobezilla says, I hate that everything is a remake or remaster these days. The Naked Gun is coming out soon, another remake. Why is there no new stuff anymore? I know the creativity is not there. The studios are very cynical. They just think it's easier, rather than developing stories and scripts and characters and whatnot, to rehash old stuff. I think a lot of it is just a business thing. These people are thinking about business, they're not thinking about creativity. Kylie says, I still prefer the Tim Curry version of It. I actually quite like the new It. The new It was, the Tim Curry version was good, but I quite like the new It as well, to be fair. I think they did a pretty good job. But yeah, the old one with Tim Curry, very good too. Guryon says, Misery, Shawshank, and The Shining were the best King adaptations. Stephen King looks weird, doesn't he? Has he had like plastic surgery or something? He's got a weird face. He looks like this weird kind of cross between Jim Carrey and Bob Lazar or something. Jim Carrey, he looks like a cross between Jim Carrey as the Grinch and Bob Lazar. What a weird face Stephen King has got. Don't know if that, like I say, is surgery or what. Very strange looking guy. Ayed says they're remaking Narnia next. Damn. Guryon says even classic films like Scarface are remakes. Yeah, Scarface is a remake, but at least they waited a few decades, and at least they hadn't remade it like 5 times before. Because today we get remakes of remakes upon remakes. I mean, Marvel are the worst for that, right? They just keep remaking the same things over and over again. Ridiculous. But yeah, Scarface was a remake. The original was like set in Chicago or New York or whatever in the 20s. And he was an Italian-American mobster. Whereas when Francis Ford Coppola did his version, it was in Miami in the early 1980s. And it was featuring Cuban gangsters. Shout out to Jaden Ellis for the super chat. He says, sad news, Palpatine actor passed away. Yeah, I think I heard about that. Robsky says Jim Carrey is a lasagna. All right, that's an interesting comment. Kayvon Green says expensive IPs need to generate money. Yeah, I think they just don't want to spend the money or invest in the time to develop scripts and stories and new characters and so on and so forth. Maybe they just think it's more cost effective to rehash old stuff. So many of these studios own certain franchises, so they just look into their back catalog and say, oh, let's rehash something we've already got. Then we don't have to pay anybody for their story, for their script. You know what I mean? Yeah. Ronaldo says, I'm sure there's an It series coming out later this year. G-Man says Stephen King is just weird. Yeah, he's very weird. Black Dynamite. Shout out to Black Dynamite. He says Stephen King looks like what he writes about. I can't disagree with that. David Mean says, big up. I read something the other day about they're going to remake Boys in the Hood. Oh, okay. Robsky says, sorry, we're saying Stephen King looks like Jim Carrey and a lasagna. Cloud says Ian McDermott. I think it's called Ian McDermid. Diramid. I forget how his name is pronounced. Outmatch says, have you seen Danny Garcia's Tony Montana impression? No, I haven't. And somebody asked me about the Eubank Jr. Conor Benn trailer. I did see it. I mean, that trailer is really more about promoting the Fatal Fury video game than it is about the actual Eubank Jr. Conor Benn fight, isn't it? So, it was what it was. Shout out to James G for the super chat. He says, remember, he has died before. The dark side of the force is a pathway to many abilities that some consider to be unnatural. Big up James G. I like the way he worked that in there. You're like me in conversations with people, you know? Sometimes I'll just I'll use it as an opportunity to come with some Palpatine lines. That's right. Shout out to Kayvon Green for the super chat. He says, gotta take my wife out on date night. FML, before I go, is Boots dead at the weight? Thinking of laying some serious wood. He looks dead at the weight, but some of these fighters incredibly can drain themselves down 15, 20 pounds and still perform on the night. But I don't have much faith in Boots right now, staying at 147 pounds. I can't tell you whether it's going to be Stanionis that upsets him, but it wouldn't surprise me. I don't want to be responsible for you losing any money. But yeah, he definitely looks dead at the weight. In fact, if you haven't seen this picture, let me get the picture up before you go of Boots. This was him on Wednesday. He did a photo shoot on Fight Week, right? Look at Boots. Look at the state of Boots here. Let me show you here. That's Boots right now. That was Boots on Wednesday. The weigh-ins today, I'm not sure if the weigh-ins happened yet, but that was, look at Boots on Wednesday. He looks like he just stepped out of a refugee camp. That's crazy. He don't even look like the same person. So, yeah, I would say take your advisement from looking at that picture. What do you think? You think he's going to be able to recover and still have energy enough to beat Stanionis? Because that weight cut is wild for Boots Ennis there. Wild. See, everyone's coming with the Palpatine quotes now. Not from a Jedi. That's right. Kylie even. Yeah, I'm afraid the deflector shield should be quite operational. Quite operational. Yeah, Triple R, that's one of my favorite lines for Palpatine. I love democracy. I love the Republic. Do it. That's the one. Mr. Lucas says, oh God, that line in Rise of Skywalker was shocking. Which line is that? Because I definitely haven't seen Rise of Skywalker. Shout out to Kayvon Green and shout out to James G. Have a good night out with a wife, Mr. Green. G-Man says Boots weighed in at 146.6. Mura's man says he's absolutely dead. Looks like a guy from a war-torn African country. Worse than that. He looks like somebody from, like I say, some type of famine. Shout out to AJJA for the super chat. He says, are you a fan of Korean thrillers? They are serious. The Chaser Memories of Murder. I Saw the Devil, to name a few. The Departed was a remake of one. Yeah, The Departed was a remake of, was it Old Boy? Is that what it was a remake of? No. Internal Affairs. Internal Affairs is what it was a remake of, right? The Departed was a remake of Internal Affairs. Correct me if I'm wrong. But no, I've never really been into Korean films. I did see Squid Game, season 1, which I thought was really good. It's obviously a series, not a movie. Season 2 was kind of trash. Hopefully season 3 is better. But Old Boy is another like classic Korean film, isn't it? I don't think I've ever seen Old Boy, but I remember there was a lot of fanfare about it back in the days. I'm sure they've remade that with a Western version, right? Old Boy. G-Man says the weigh-in was about 2 hours ago. Yeah, because a lot of the time with these big fights, apart from the heavyweights, they'll have the real weigh-in quite early on in the day, and they'll have a ceremonial weigh-in in the evening where the fighters are fully hydrated. So they're not going to look that crazy on the scales at the ceremonial weigh-in because the real weigh-in happened, let's say, in the morning. Triple R says, man looking like a pirate from Captain Phillips. Yeah, something like that. It's crazy. Let's get this disturbing picture of Boots off the screen. Back to the night flight. There we go. Forward it a little bit. But shout out to AJJA14 for the super chat. A lot of people are into Korean films and whatnot. Mr. Lucas says they copied it from Revenge of the Sith to explain why he was alive. Okay, he said the dark side of the Force won in Rise of Skywalker. It's treason then. He had so many great lines. Look, everyone coming out with the lines then. Yeah, that's when Mace Windu pulls up on Palpatine to come and arrest him. And Mace Windu's giving him the speech. And that's when Palpatine's like, it's treason then. What does Mace Windu say? I'm arresting you on behalf of the Senate or something. And he's like, I am the Senate. Ayed says, my favorite sci-fi series is The Expanse. Posu Hula? God, I'm not sure how to pronounce that name, but he says, why is everything Korean so popular all of a sudden? I've been asking myself that, but I think because they're being more creative than Western directors and whatnot. They're more creative, I guess. G-Man says, Palpatine, no, you will die. Yeah, that part is hilarious. And then he's like, unlimited power. Palpatine is literally the only good thing about those prequels. Is Palpatine. That's it. I am the Senate. That's right. Yep, my little green friend when he's talking to Yoda. I'm too weak. That's right. Shout out to Chris. He says, big up Hatman. I'm late for the night flight. They still serving drinks? Oh, yeah. All the way through. Drinks are available on this night flight. Anakin. Good. That's right, yeah. And the bit where he goes, once more the Sith will rule the galaxy, and we shall have peace. All while he's doing the exact opposite about, once more the Sith will rule the galaxy, and we shall have peace. Ronaldo says, nah, that scene's kill me every time. When he killed Mace Windu, and he just goes, ah. That's right, he's all smoking, right? His skin is literally smoking. He kills Mace Windu. Sends him flying out the window. And he's like, ah. Oh my God. That character is so ridiculous. Oh dear. That character's so ridiculous. Cloud says, we found out Hatman is a huge Star Wars nerd. Not even a Star Wars nerd, just a Palpatine nerd. Because those prequels were terrible. But Palpatine, fantastic. Yeah, there you go, G-Man. Henceforth, you shall be known as Darth Vader. That's right, unlimited power. The Negotiator starring Kevin the Scumbag Spacey. Have I seen The Negotiator? I'm not sure. I've seen K-Pax. That's a weird film. Have you seen that? K-Pax, Kevin Spacey. Shout out to Workstation. Al Booger says, always love a good over-the-top villain. Me too. Ronaldo says, Lord of the Rings clears Star Wars in my opinion. Yeah, I would say Lord of the Rings is better than Star Wars. Yeah. But that one character, Palpatine, is just fantastic. Okay, Kevin Spacey and Jeff Bridges. Callum says Natalie Portman was the best thing about the prequels in my opinion. Really? I thought she was quite bland. Very bland, actually, personally. And whoever the guy was that played the young Vader, before he was Vader, Anakin, he was just annoying as hell. Wasn't he annoying? He was so annoying, that guy. Hayden Christensen. Yeah, that guy was so annoying. Maybe he deliberately played it that way. I'm not sure, but Shout out to Danny for the super chat. He says, enjoying the stream while on a late night walk. Whereabouts are you? You out in the country? You in the city? Walker says, I can't bring myself to hate the prequels. I just can't. Well, I do hate them other than Palpatine. I mean, other than Palpatine scenes, they're literally unwatchable. Well, maybe a few scenes with Mace Windu, but apart from that, it's like, ugh. I guess Ewan McGregor's okay, right? But they've got Jar Jar Binks, way too much CGI. You know, the CGI is like something out of a Marvel movie in the prequels. Don't like it at all. But yeah, the Jar Jar Binks character is just awful. The governor says prequels get hated on, but I enjoy them for the nostalgia. See, that shows how old I am. Because I always think of the prequels as being new. It's all relative, right? Depends how long you've lived. It's like somebody the other day, when we were talking about psychology, he mentioned cluster A, cluster B, and all these terms under the umbrella of antisocial personality disorder, which is how they class various types of personality disorder, right? An antisocial personality disorder, I think became, I don't know when the term was invented, but certainly became popular maybe after the year 2000 in psychology, way after the year 2000, which to someone as old as me is relatively recent. Like the Star Wars prequels to me are quite recent, but they're like 20 years old, aren't they? Or are they more than 20 years? How old are the Star Wars prequels? Are they 20 years old? It's like certain rappers. Lil Wayne to me is, I think of him as a new rapper. Lil Wayne. But Lil Wayne is like mad old school to most people. Danny says, countryside overlooking a city, beautiful scenery. All right. Danny doing the damn thing. Watch out for UFOs and cryptids. Shout out to AJJA for the super chat. He says, remember watching trailers at the cinema with literally every trailer reveal being a genuine surprise. Some trailers you didn't even know the movie was being made. Internet took away surprise and mystery now. That's a good point. That is a good point. Yeah, that is a very, very good point. The internet has taken away a lot of mystery. And yeah, you would be surprised by trailers and whatnot. Indeed. You used to look forward to trailers far more than now. When you go cinema now, it's like, don't even care about the trailers because you're not expecting to see anything good. Whereas back in the days, you would arrive, make sure, early to see the trailers because there might be something spectacular. There often was. Shout out to Workstation for the super chat. He says, funniest Palpatine line for me is when Anakin is about to kill Christopher Lee's character and Palpatine. Yeah, it says, do it. Do it. Kill him. Kill him now. That one. And Anakin's like, it's not right. Do it. Good. Anakin, good. He's too dangerous to be kept alive. Okay, Revenge of the Sith was released in 2005. Kylie says, when you realize 20 years old isn't the 80s anymore. I know. It's a madness. The early 2000s, see, as you get older, your perception of time passing accelerates. So like the first 20 years of my life felt like a much longer time than the following 25 years, right? From the early 2000s to now, it feels like a long time, but not a crazy long time, because obviously I've been an adult all the time, right? I was an adult by the late 90s. So when you're an adult, time passes a lot faster. Shout out to Orca for the super chat. He says, Revenge of the Sith is going to be 20 years old in May, which will make it by definition retro. Yeah. See, that's my age. To me, I don't think of it as retro, but to people that are much younger, obviously, it definitely is retro. Shout out to Al Booger. For the super chat. Behind the scenes. That's right. The governor says you become more aware of time as an adult because you're thinking about the future as a teen and a kid. You're living in the present. As a teen, I was always thinking about the future. I was very rarely thinking about the present as a teen because I didn't like school. So I was constantly thinking about, oh God, I can't wait till I no longer have to go to school. Even though I was truant for like 50% of the time. But still, I hated school that much. And obviously my parents pressuring me to attend and this, that, and the other. I hated school that much. I was always looking forward to the time when I wouldn't have to be in school anymore. So for me as a kid, I was always looking forward. As a teenager anyway, I was always looking forward. I'll just call him Possu. Possu says, I was born in 85. Are you guys younger or older than me? I'm way older. I'm way older. Chris says, I agree. I'm 45 and the first 20 years feels like double the last 25. Yep. Exactly the same for me. The past 25 has gone so quick, bro. It's almost like it didn't happen compared to the first 20. Outmatch Boxing says, Boomer's in the chat. See, Outmatch, I think, is in his early 20s. It's crazy to think that when he was born, I was an adult. you know how crazy that is? This is a guy who I have intellectual conversations with. You know? And yet, when he was born, I was already an adult. God, I'm old. Dan says, I am 27, I am old. Well, if you want to swap ages with me, I'll be more than happy to do that. We can use some kind of time machine, quantum physics weirdness, sci-fi technology. Yeah. If you want to swap your age, your 27-year-old, apparently you're saying it's old with me, we'll do that right now. Robski says, yeah, not from a Jedi. Truth Channel says, cool, bro. Just curious what part of the UK you're from, Hatman. From South London. SW9, Brixton. Ayed says, living in the UK ages you plus 5 years. O'Neill Marston says, I'm 28 and I feel old. Possu says, as a man, I would love to be 30 to 40 forever. Okay. I'd prefer to be in my 20s, but be in the position I'm in now as far as knowledge, wisdom, finances, and whatnot. Almost says, any advice for new soon-to-be dads? None. None that, you would probably take, because I don't have any kids. Hyro says, 30s is the best decade for me so far. Well, my 30s was better than my 20s in terms of less stress, more money, etc. Because my 20s, I was broke, stressed as hell, but you're in your physical prime in your 20s, And that's always a nice thing. Okay, my comment will always trigger you, says Hatman, with your wisdom and knowledge, what kind of advice would you give to anyone entering their 20s? I would say it depends on where you are right now. Are you happy in life? As a man, do you have good career prospects? Does it appear as though you have good career prospects? How are you getting along with women? Are you finding it easy with them? Difficult? It all depends on these things. Because as I've been advising many young men in particular who are not having such a good time, entrepreneurship is definitely something that I would encourage people to explore. It's not for everyone. Let's just get that straight. Not everybody can be an entrepreneur. But yeah, entrepreneurship is something I think people should explore. Because that allows you to, in many cases at least, depending on what kind of entrepreneurship you're doing, it may allow you to travel, live in different countries, and therefore be open to living under different systems, different cultures and whatnot. And when you have, or when the world is your oyster in that way, when you're able to move anywhere and work from anywhere, then, it opens up your options as far as the social scene and what have you. So it really depends on where you're at in life and what you want to do and whether you're happy going into your 20s. Shout out to Workstation for the super chat. He says, enjoying the stream, Hatman. I came back from training and suffered my first head clash in sparring and came out with a cut on top of my head. Shout out to Workstation. Yeah, I never got cut in sparring. I broke my hand in sparring and I cut somebody else very badly in sparring. We were doing body sparring. I was sparring with this Jamaican guy who's like a couple inches taller than me. And he was like a boxer, back foot boxer, moving around the ring and whatnot, using his jab. And I was coming at him. And yeah, we were body sparring. And I came in for a particular shot and the top of my head hit his eye. And he had a terrible gash. Blood all over. That sounded crazy. Yeah, but it was blood all over the place. Terrible cut. But thankfully, I never got cut in sparring myself. I mean, normally when you got a good headgear on, it's unlikely very unlikely you'll get cut. But body sparring, it can happen, especially if it's fighters of different heights. Shout out to Workstation. The governor says, do you invest in stocks? My portfolio was taken a hammer in recently. Yeah, I've got various investments, crypto, stocks, precious metals, etc. And I'm late to the party. I've only got into that over the past, I want to say 3-4 years. Very late to the party because I really know nothing about stocks and shares and crypto and all this type of stuff. I've had to learn it very, very quickly, or learn a little bit about it very, very quickly from much more informed people in my element group who have been teaching me these things. Overmatch says, maybe being in the UK is coloring my perception, but the point you make about men loving more deeply than women seems truer by the day. I wonder, are women inherently selfish when it comes to dating? I think they are. I think the nature of women is the same. The essence of women is the same everywhere, but patriarchy keeps the darker aspects of their nature under control. Yeah, it keeps it under control. There are certain social pressures and whatnot in patriarchal societies upon women whereby they're expected to act in a particular way. And women generally are more, what's the word I'm looking for? Impressionable, right? They're more impressionable than men. They're more agreeable. I say agreeable. They're more agreeable to the dominant society. So wherever the dominant society is pushing, women are more likely to agree with it and go along with it than men are. Hence, when you see all the woke stuff, women are far more keen or willing to go along with it than men generally. And that's female nature. So, yeah, patriarchy keeps the darker aspects of female nature under control. And this is why I say that I am a big advocate for polygyny. Not polygamy, but polygyny. That's where only the man can have multiple wives. I'm a big advocate for it. I'm not saying that it's right for every man. And to clarify it, in many African countries where polygyny is legal, when the man marries his first wife, he has to tell her that he may take other wives before they get married. And then it's a take it or leave it situation. She can either agree to marry him on that condition or not. So you're not deceiving anyone. But the reason I say that is because men have to work much harder to actually get a woman than women have to work to get a man. Because female beauty, beauty to men is more valuable than beauty is to women. Women are hypergamous and they look at your social status, your ability to earn, so on and so forth. And they love you conditionally. Men are more likely to love, not necessarily unconditionally, but closer to unconditionally than women are. And so for those reasons and many others, it makes sense from a man's perspective, if it's legal, to have multiple wives, right? In case one of them starts flaking on you, you got backups. And then you're always in a position where you can love more safely as a man if you've got multiple wives. Shout out to Ali for the super chat. Did I miss another one? No, I got that one. Shout out to Ali. He says, growing up in London is the best, but as an adult with responsibilities, it's the worst. I just turned 20. Once I get my money up, I'm out. Is it the best? I mean, I had some fun times growing up in London, but there were some bad times too. Hard to say really, since I, as a teenager, I didn't know anything other than London. But, I don't know. It was alright in spots. Hyro says, having multiple wives sounds like a nightmare. Depends on the culture. As I say, if you're living in a patriarchal society, then it's not as difficult as you might think. Because there are many countries in Africa where men have got loads of wives. Literally loads of wives. I think one of it's either the current president of South Africa or former, he's got like 7 or 8 wives or something. Might even be more than that. Wan says, you can find good women in smaller towns in the UK, but obviously there's not a large pool to choose from. That's true. In the cities, the situation is a lot more dire. Right? So in Western cities, that is where you find the worst women, for sure. Got a terrible dating culture in the cities. Juan says, so would you say that at the start of a new relationship? Yes. If I do end up having multiple wives in some African country, yeah, I'm going to tell the wife. I mean, it's a legal requirement in most African countries, as I understand it, that allow polygyny. Yeah, you have to tell them up front, I'm going to take more than one wife. Are you okay with that? If not, kick rocks. I'll find someone who is okay with it. Shout out to Kayvon Green for the super chat. He says, women are born with value, men create value indeed. Exactly that. And since I've worked all my life to create my value, why the hell should you, the woman, just rock up when you haven't had to put any work in to be here with me, somebody that's created my value? Well, guess what? Now you are going to have to put some work in. If you want monogamy from me, you're going to have to, jump through hoops. You're going to have to swim across oceans. Yeah? You're going to have to be unbelievably exceptional to get monogamy from me. Otherwise, you're going to be wife number 2, 3, or 4. Ayed says, Hatman, the IBF check weight isn't a thing for this Ennis fight, apparently. Is that right? I didn't know that. Where did you hear that? That might be a game changer. Robski says, when were you in Brixton? Hatman used to live in Streatham. I moved out of Brixton in about 2007. I think I moved out of Brixton around 2006, 2007. Yeah, around there. When I was living in Brixton from the early 90s, when me and my family first arrived in the UK, we were actually living in Cardiff in Wales for a couple years before relocating to London, South London, Brixton. From the early maybe very late 80s, early 90s, up until about 2007. Alexander says, Hatman, you're an alpha male, a heavyweight, a high earner. Does your advice work for all men? My advice definitely doesn't work for all men. You got to find out what works for you. As I was saying earlier on, I'm not saying that polygyny, having multiple wives is the right thing for every man, and it's not even attainable for a lot of men. But what I will say is, whatever money you're earning, if you have transferable skills or if you have an online business, when you move to a developing country, all of a sudden you go from being an average earner to being one of the top 10% earners in the country. And that basically opens up a whole heap of extra women that are now available for you, right? Because you've gone from being a mid-earner. I mean, think about it. What's the average wage in the UK? Is it like 38 grand or something? 35 grand, right? Well, 35 grand. What do you think the average wage might be in, I don't know, pick a developing country. Romania, where the Tates live. What's the average wage there? Because I'm telling you, it's not 35 grand, right? Or go to some African country or go to Thailand. The average wage is not close to that. So all of a sudden with your 35, 40 grand, you're in the top 10%, right? So if you can't earn more money, but you've got transferable skills or an online business, relocate. Then you don't have to earn more money. Now, one says, I'm a joiner here in the UK. If I moved to one of these developing countries, I'd be earning less. Yeah, I'm sure. But like I say, that's why if you can have an online business or some other type of business where you can still make the same amount of money. Jay Silver says 38 grand is like 200 grand in Romanian money. All right, some people are disputing the average wage in the UK. Let me look it up. Because there are different ways of calculating averages, right? Average salary in UK. I'm going to look it up now. Okay, so it says this. It says I was right. In 2024, the average gross annual salary in the UK for full-time employment is roughly £37,000. Yeah, 37 grand is the average. But averages can be calculated in different ways, right? But that is that the median? Anyway, it's saying 37 grand. So I was there or thereabouts. Yeah, the mean maybe. When you take the lowest, wage and then do a calculation with the highest amount of money and so on. Kuzan says, Hatman, are you a hipster when it comes to interest in movies? Am I a hipster when it comes to... I don't think so. Andrew says, in London, the average is about 50k. Let me look up what the average wage is in London. But I tell you what, if you're earning anything less than... Okay, in London, it says the average wage is 44k. But then again, it depends on how you do the calculation. Because on this one now, it's saying the average wage in London is 44k, but the UK average is 33k, which is less than the other one. And then there's another one, depending on how you do the calculation, from a website called Plumplot, which is saying the average salary in London is 66k, and the average UK salary is 45k. So I don't know. All depends on how you do the calculation. All I can tell you is, for a single person living in London, you are going to struggle if you're making less than, 50k at a minimum. Unless you got a council flat, right? Because council flat, the rent is very cheap. But if you're renting privately, 50k is the absolute bare minimum you can be earning if you're living alone and have any kind of life. To be anything even close to comfortable, it needs to be at least 60k in London. Otherwise, you're really going to be living hand to mouth. Adrian says, big up the train drivers. Yeah, train drivers are on what, like 70k or something? Alexander says, Hatman, you're a man of health, wealth, and intelligence. Well, I don't know about wealth. I'm doing okay. Wouldn't say I'm wealthy, but where does your gratitude go without faith? To myself. where else would it go, right? To myself and blind luck. Myself for the hard work and perseverance and blind luck, born in a set of circumstances with a certain set of abilities that, other people don't have, just as there are people more fortunate and more talented than myself that have a lot more than me, that became comfortable in life much earlier than me. A lot of it's just random, innit? It's a lottery. Now, Adrian says 73K currently top rate. I guess you mean for the train drivers. And Mr. Bean says, I find 60K would still be hard in London. Depending on where you live, it wouldn't be that hard. And if you got kids as well. If you got kids, yeah, 60 grand is going to be tough. But if you don't have kids and you live like, I don't know, in zone 4 or something, zone 4, zone 5, like in the outer zones of London, no, you'll be all right on 60K. Be all right. You'll be able to have a car and a nice flat and all that, living in zone 4, zone 5 on 60K. Danny says average wage for middle/working class in Northern England is probably closer to 29 grand. Yeah, in London, wages are much higher and the cost of living is higher. Really and truly, you will live a much better quality of life living outside of London, living up north. You will live a much better quality of life. Truth be told. Now, Jake says, Hatman, what do you think is a decent amount of money to have saved for backup? Middle age, with house, car, etc. A decent amount of money. Again, it all depends on where you live, what your expenses are, if you've got any debts. Try to save as much as you can, right? Also have investments. I personally like precious metals because they don't fluctuate as much in price, in value, as stock, shares, and crypto. So it all depends on where you are and what your circumstances are. But at a bare minimum, if you can have at least 6 months rent or 6 months of your mortgage in the bank, bare minimum, that's a good start. Because then you've at least got a buffer if you suffer any type of crisis. That's correct, Black Dynamite. According to stats I've seen, if you take London, the economic power and wealth of London out of the UK has the same per capita GDP as Mississippi, which is one of America's poorest states. So London literally drives the whole UK economy. Kylie says gold is doing well right now. Well, that tends to happen in times of economic uncertainty, especially when crypto's going down and stocks going down. That's usually when precious metals go up, when people get nervous, right? Because of the uncertainty of things like the fortunes of a company and politics and Trump with his tariffs and the Chinese with tariffs and all this other stuff going on. The tried and tested is gold. That's what people tend to revert to when they're unsure about what's going to happen. Shout out to Gaz for the super chat. He says, have you seen and do you enjoy The Sopranos? I've never really been into it. I've seen a few scenes over the years and tried to watch a few episodes, but it's never really been my thing, truth be told. I know many people who I chat to say that The Sopranos is the greatest series of all time. But personally, it's not really up my street. But shout out to Gaz for the super chat. Wan says, I live in the Peak District about an hour from Manchester. The difference is like Mordor to the Shire. Boxing Fan says, what is your favorite historical movie? Favorite historical movie? Because, you know, most historical movies are not even close to being historically accurate. So I just want to put that proviso out there. They're loosely based on historical events. Like Gladiator, for example, right, is based in ancient Rome with some characters loosely based on real people and whatnot. Gangs of New York, a similar thing. It's a historical movie loosely based on real life people. So I'd probably say Gangs of New York, even though, you know, when we say historical, it's not like thousands of years ago. It's set in the late 1800s. JR says, Hatman, have you ever worn Pathin sport gloves? If so, what's your opinion? They don't last, is what I've heard. No, I never worn them. I know the Klitschko's, particularly Vladimir Klitschko, used to really like Pathin sport gloves. And ever since Fury fought Klitschko, he's adopted Pathin sport gloves. He loves Pathin sport. Solid Snake says, Braveheart wasn't very accurate either. The leper in the attic actually looked like John Fury. I'll have to go back and watch that scene. I've forgotten about the leper in the attic. And I forgot about Braveheart. Yeah, I like Braveheart too. And also another Mel Gibson film, Apocalypto. So, you know, none of these, or very few of these historical films are actually accurate, or particularly accurate, but they're entertaining nonetheless. Braveheart was very good. Definitely like that. And as I say, Apocalypto was good as well. Apocalypto was very immersive, you know? Very immersive, because they actually shot that in Mayan, in the Mayan language. And so you could really imagine yourself in that Mayan civilization, do you know what I mean? Going through that story and all that. And it was like, wow, thank God I didn't incarnate there. Whenever that was it 1400s or something? 1500s when the conquistadors arrived in the Americas, and the Mayans were cutting people's hearts out and all that stuff. Yeah. Thank God I didn't incarnate in that civilization. Right, Fernie says, Hatman, what's the greatest boxer nickname in your opinion? Iron Mike and Razor Ruddock are my favorites. Iron Mike is definitely a great one. Iron Mike, you know, great nickname. Others would be, let me think now. Real Deal, Evander Holyfield is a good name. Real Deal Holyfield. The chat's going to have to help me out. I'm an old man. I forget so much. Steel Hammer, Bronze Bomb. Those are not particularly good to me personally. Hitman, well, Tommy Hearns was the first Hitman, right? Dark Destroyer, Nigel Benn, Homicide Hank. Call the Truth Williams. I like Real Deal Holyfield. You know, it's got a great ring to it. Real Deal Holyfield. And I am Mike. Tommy Hearns was, he had two nicknames. One of them was the Hitman, and the other one was the Motor City Cobra. Yeah, the Motor City Cobra. James Clifford says, dazzling Darren Barker. Choice says, Tommy Hearns or Bret Hart? That's a good question, actually, because Bret Hart was around in the 80s. But I want to say, I suspect Tommy Hearns had the name The Hitman first before Bret Hart. But correct me if I'm wrong. Macho Camacho's a good one, yeah. Smoking Joe Frazier, that's a great name. Of course. Smoking Joe. Hands of Stone. Yeah. See, a name like that makes him sound like a legend. You know what I mean? Obviously, he was a legend, but that's like a legend, a name that you would give to a legend. The Hands of Stone. It's like a mythological hero. Do you know what I mean? The Hands of Stone. A shout out to Danny for the super chat. He says, the issue with simulation theory is the devaluation of life. If you go through hardships, what's the point? Just restart. Interesting concept, though. Well, who's to say you get a second playthrough? Because there are many versions of simulation theory. It's a theory at the end of the day. It's very much hypothetical, right? So, who says there is a restart? It's like old school video games, you know? Or arcade cabinets, arcade machines. You run out of money, no more goes. But shout out to Danny for the super chat. I mean, I don't know, obviously, but I suspect that there is something to simulation theory. I mean, it's really dealing with the nature of reality. And you know, when you say simulation theory, that's just a way to try and conceptualize what this reality might be, to put it in, to describe it in a way that we can relate to, when really and truly calling it a simulation probably isn't doing it justice, right? It's probably far more complex than any simulation we can imagine, if it is a simulation. But yeah, shout out to Danny. The Body Snatcher. That's right. Yeah, Dylan White didn't live up to the Body Snatcher name of Mike McCallum. And truth be told, I quite like Tyson Fury's nickname, the Gypsy King. I think the Gypsy King is a really good nickname. Yeah? I like the Gypsy King nickname. Iron Fist. Yeah, there you go. Like, again, the Hands of Stone. It's like a hero from Greek mythology or something. Do you know what I mean? The Hands of Stone. Kylie says, I remember when they started calling B-Hop the alien. Yeah, that's because he was defying Father Time for a while anyway. So they were like, no, this guy must be an alien. How can he still be beating guys in their 20s when he's in his 40s? Danny says, then could it prove God there must be an architect? Well, it could, but then there could be other beings that are not necessarily ethereal spirits that created it. Who knows, right? And then you have to ask the question, what is God? I've been talking a lot about this on Patreon. What is God? Is it the version that we are taught through the Abrahamic religions? Personally, I'm skeptical about that version of a God existing, based upon whatever evidence we can see around us. But that's just me. Zach Christ says, thoughts on adolescence propaganda show? Well, propaganda is the operative word, isn't it? It seems to be going hand in hand with Keir Starlin rolling out this, or trying to enforce this online safety bill now. You know, that's not a coincidence that when Stalin is trying to bully various social media sites and video sharing platforms, while he's trying to do that, they're putting out that show on Netflix, which is basically demonizing the manosphere. Yeah, I don't think that's a coincidence at all. Seems coordinated. Chet Perry says Ruddock versus Holyfield. Holyfield. Yeah, prime for prime Holyfield. JR says the Tasmanian Devil. Yep, Vinny Pazienza. Copezilla says it's crap that we're only here one time and that's it. Surely there's more to it for life to happen on Earth is like 1 in a gazillion trillion. Jay says Keir Starlin is crazy. I've been calling him that for a while, Keir Starlin. All right, we've got some Christians in the chat and other faiths, I'm sure. And I respect everyone's beliefs. You know, whatever you're comfortable with and whatever helps you is all good. But if people ask my view, I don't see any evidence for a benevolent, all-powerful God. That's my view. I don't see any evidence for it. The evidence I see suggests that God is either not all-powerful. If God exists at all, he's either not all-powerful or he's not all good. Big Bang Zhang. That's been one of the more fun nicknames in recent times. Big Bang Zhang. King Khan says good is subjective. That's true. Good is subjective. But for example, from my perspective, right, from my subjective perspective, kids that are born into a life of abuse, poverty, getting trafficked, dying from bombs falling from the sky, from my perspective, that is evil, is bad. Okay? What kind of God would allow that to happen to innocent souls? Do you know what I mean? The amount of stuff like that that happens on planet Earth, I cannot reconcile that with a loving, all-powerful God that has the ability to stop it all. Do you know what I mean? King Khan says, but humans cause that. Yeah, but if God is all-powerful, then he would stop humans doing it. Why would he allow humans to do it? No, but you say everyone will have judgment. Well, that's no good for the child that's going through all that, is it? A bit too late for them. They have to go through the horror of abuse and what have you. An all-loving, all-powerful God would not allow humans to actually inflict these type of horrors on children. No, but again, free will doesn't answer it. If God is all loving, he wouldn't allow innocent souls, free will or otherwise, because he's supposedly all powerful. He can do anything, right? He can stop anything. He would not allow innocent people to suffer like that. As JR said there, perhaps God isn't all good. Yeah, from my perspective, God either cannot be all good or he's not all powerful. Yeah? Either he is not all good because he's not stopping so many of the horrible things that happen, or he can't stop many of the horrible things that happen because he's not all powerful. A shout out to Danny for the super chat. He says, should atheists hope there's no good for their sake? I think one of the reasons that atheists hate God, I'm not saying all atheists, by the way, but I think a lot of atheists hate God, and they are angry with the concept of God because they do want to be able to live without any type of morality at all. You know, they want to be able to live their lives without any consequence. So I think that's one of the reasons that a lot of atheists hate God so much. Because in a way, their psychology, and I've said this many times, the psychology of atheists is actually very similar to the psychology of religious people. Religious people obey God out of fear, and atheists disbelieve in God out of fear as well, a lot of the time. Yeah. So again, religious people believe in God out of fear, either fear of God himself or fear of what might happen in their life if there's no God, or what might happen after they die if there's no God. Fear is motivating people a lot of the time to believe in God. But at the same time, fear is motivating people to disbelieve. Fear of the consequences of living the way that they're living. They don't want to believe that there's going to be bad consequences. So yeah, it's kind of this ironic similarity with the mindset of religious people and atheists. Atheists in particular don't seem to see this. They seem to be completely oblivious to it, but there's a lot of similarities. And Mark says, we rule the world, he can't intervene. Well, if he can't intervene, that means he's not all powerful. Simple. If he can't intervene, that means he's not all powerful, which is what I said at the start. From the evidence I see in the world, God is either, if he exists, he's either not all good or he's not all powerful. Andrew says he won't, not can't. Well, if he won't, then he's not all good. From my perspective, yeah. If you say he won't, he can, but he won't, in my view, that means he's not all good then. Because if he was all good, he would intervene. If he chooses not to intervene, then in my view, that's not a good God. Al Booger says, simple logic indeed. Simple, it's straightforward. He's either not all good or he's not all powerful. O'Neill Marston says, Gypsy King versus Iron Mike. Probably go with Iron Mike. Let Me A says, what if there is a God, but he's nothing like any religion imagines it? I think that would be what is logically most likely. That there is some kind of force or entity or whatever the case may be that helped to bring this reality into existence or design this reality. But, you know, perhaps human beings can't even comprehend what God is and what God's real motives are. All I know is that the way it's described, the way God is described in the Abrahamic religions, I don't buy it. I don't buy that version, that description. I don't buy it. Shout out to TC. Copezilla says, why are some babies born with cancer? They haven't done anything. I just want to know, what does the Bible say? Indeed. These are the questions. See, this is why, one of the reasons I've never been religious. And many other people who are not religious, they find that religion just cannot offer them satisfactory answers for many of the horrors in the world. Do you know what I mean? It's never offered me any satisfactory answers for this stuff. Danny says, nothing created everything according to atheists. Indeed, this is why I am agnostic. I don't nail my colors to a mast with things that I cannot prove. I can't prove that God exists, and I can't prove he doesn't exist. So I'll just say, I don't know. I can give you my suspicions and tell you where the evidence that I see from my perspective seems to lean. But I can't tell you for certain. I don't have those answers. I'm agnostic. Mark says you have to repent, totally submit to God. Tell that to little babies who can't talk that are getting abused and killed. Well, how are they able to avoid the horrors that happen to them? Again, these are the things that religion can never offer answers for. And if God is not willing to intervene, then he's not a good God as far as I'm concerned. Simple. Alexander says, God didn't give us solutions because that would make us weak. God gave us free will to find the solutions. Again, little kids who get killed, abused, and so on, they have no chance to find any solutions. We come back to the original point. There are plenty of people that have no chance in this world, and all that will ever meet them is horror, violence, and death. So, yeah, nothing that Mark Birdle, is saying is answering the questions, right? There are plenty of people in this world, kids, never had a chance to do, they don't even understand the concept of God. They can't even talk before they're taken out of the world. So, Danny says the religious books of antiquity have a wealth of knowledge like the Bible's Genesis, the fall of man. That knowledge must have come from somewhere other than a great mind. Well, it came from older cultures, older existing cultures. I mean, there are so many things, concepts in Christianity that you can find in ancient Egypt. Even the concept of one God, a monotheistic God, as far as we can tell, started in ancient Egypt. That's right, Al Booger. F free will, I'll take not suffering over free will every time. You know, there is a school of thought in the alternative community now that this world is actually a place that has been set up to harvest negative energy. That's what this reality actually is. Because if you think about it, Look out in your back garden right now. There are creatures killing and eating other creatures alive. What kind of God would create a world where living beings have to kill and eat other living beings to survive? That's crazy. We as humans do it too, right? We kill and eat other living things in order to survive. It's literally a killing factory. What kind of God would create a reality like that? Like, he can create any kind of reality he wants. He could create a reality where you can absorb energy from the sun and you don't even need to eat anything, right? If he can do anything, then he can create the laws of physics to be whatever he wants. But somehow he has decided to create, if it's a he, if it's a God that exists, he's decided to create a situation, a world where living things have to kill and eat other living things to survive. So suffering is built in. Like suffering, if this place was deliberately designed, then suffering is part of the intention. Whatever created this place wanted everyone to experience suffering. It's crazy. It's crazy. VS and Beat says pro-atheist debate. I'm not an atheist, I'm an agnostic, but so I critique both sides. I critique atheists probably more than I critique atheists more than I critique religious people, for sure. Troy says a free-for-all, basically. Yeah, this world is like a killing factory. It's like literally dog eat dog. It's what kind of God would create this world where we've all got to kill other living things to survive? It's crazy. Just looking through some of the other comments, since we've leaned all the way into this religion God debate now. One says the Gnostic Gospels are very interesting. They are too. Because the Gnostics believed that basically the Abrahamic God was a fake. They believed the Abrahamic God was basically a demon that they called the demiurge. Ayad says, Hatman, why did people really dislike Tenet, the film? I think because the physics of Tenet intuitively don't quite make sense. And it's a very confusing film. I had to watch that film probably 3 times before it stopped giving me a headache. Like the first time I watched it, I was like, yeah. It literally turned my brain upside down. But the more I watched it, the more I started to like it. But it is confusing to a lot of people when they first watch it. Because again, it's the physics of the film. It's not so much the story, although the story can throw you off a bit, but more so the physics of the film are just so weird that you're like, would it really work like that? You're trying to get your head around it and you're like, Shout out to Striker for the super chat. He says, got on just now, but great to see you live again. Have a good one, bro. Big up, Striker. Cloud says, do you like South Park? It's alright. You know, it's alright. Cobezilla says, Tenet sound was all off. Such a loud film in a cinema. Yeah, I don't like films that are like overly loud. So I'm with you on that. Jay Silver says, would you say Al Heyman is like the Palpatine of boxing, lurking in the shadows, pulling the strings? I don't think he's got that much power now, does he? Maybe back in the days. Alexander says, Hatman, as a Christian, I just want to say you're so loved, whatever your beliefs. The world will be a better place with more people like you. Much appreciated, my brother, and right back at you. This is why, unlike atheists, I don't hate religious people. I know a lot of people find comfort and solace in religion, in believing in God, and it makes them better people. My best friend is a born-again Christian. He and his wife are devout Christians. So, right back at you, bro. It's all love. I do not see, as long as nobody's trying to oppress me with their religion or force their religion upon me, then I don't see an issue with somebody believing whatever they want to believe. We've all got to find a way to get through life, right? Psychologically, and prepare for death. It's going to happen to us all. We're all going to face that final curtain sooner or later. And there's a lot of fear, understandably, about what's behind that final curtain. None of us know. Everyone has, or many people have beliefs about what's behind the final curtain. We're all going to find out sooner or later. Shout out to Michael Schiller over there in Inverness. Hyro says, stream going deep tonight. Yeah, often do on the old night flight, Something about the nighttime that makes people think more deeply. Don't you find that? Have you ever been round to like friends' houses? In most friend groups, there's like that one friend who everyone goes round to their house. Yeah, in most friend groups. And there's one particular friend of mine where his house, his flat has been the spot for, I don't know, at least 20 years. Everyone congregates at his flat. And, he had legendary drink ups where people would go around there and have drink ups and whatnot around at his flat. And, when it's like 10, 11, 12 at night, that's when you get, the silly drunk conversations and people just being silly. That's the part of the night that I don't like. The part of the night that I liked is when it's like 4 a.m. and most of the silly drunks have either left or have gone to sleep somewhere. And it's just the deep people left in the front room. And we start having the deep chats. Them ones. Yeah, it's always late at night when the deep ones stay behind in the living room to have the deep chat. And you end up talking to like 6, 7 a.m. in the morning. Joe Slater says, you realize you can be both atheist and agnostic. Well, I'm just agnostic and I'm not atheist. Because there's a difference between being atheist in principle and atheist in practice. The vast majority of atheists I've known or encountered do not adhere to atheism in principle. They actually are subscribing to a belief that God doesn't exist. Yes, this is why they ridicule religious people all the time. This is why they're so angry about the concept of God and all this stuff. And they feel the need to constantly attack religion and attack religious people. They're not objective. Okay? Whereas I always say agnostic, because agnostic is, you don't know one way or the other. You are being objective. You're not taking a side about things that you can't prove. Again, atheism in theory is similar to that, but in practice, that's not how most atheists think or behave. Most atheists are hostile towards the existence of God. They ridicule it. Troy says, unleashing your deepest secrets. Don't know about the deepest secrets, but yeah, the late night, early morning, after hours, after all the silly drunks have left the house party, if you want to call it a house party, and there's just a few guys left in the front room, and you start having the deep conversations. I always used to enjoy those. Ayed says, I just hope life is one and done. Me too. I don't want to come back to this place, boy. I'm telling you. I don't want another go round in this world. Hell no. Especially if it's random and you can't pick who you want to be. No, thank you. Mr. Bean says, do you guys believe some of the NDE stories? A lot of people seem to say similar things about leaving the body. I am totally convinced, because I've heard so many NDE stories, out-of-body experiences, near-death experiences, out-of-body experiences. There's so many of them from people of all walks of life, professionals, people that were atheists and very skeptical. I've seen those kind of people. You can watch news clips from news programs on YouTube where people are being interviewed by even like mainstream media for whatever it's worth. And they'll get on there and tell you that, yeah, man got struck by lightning and all of a sudden he was looking down on his body and he saw all the people rush towards it. Like, there have been so many accounts of out-of-body experiences. Personally, I can't prove it, okay, objectively, but I'm convinced personally that out-of-body experiences are a real thing, that somehow your point of perception can switch from being inside of your body to being outside of your body. How that works, I don't know. Science doesn't know. Okay, but science doesn't have all the answers at any point in time. Maybe 100, 1,000 years from now, they might know how that works. How someone's point of perception can be outside of their body. Okay, maybe they'll be able to prove that scientifically in 1,000 years or 2,000 years. I don't know. But personally, based upon the enormous number of people that have had these experiences, and I've watched these interviews with them and heard them speak, and all from different walks of life, I'm convinced that it's a real thing. I'm very convinced it's a real thing. Adrian says, how do you know that you haven't already been on Earth? Well, maybe that's why I don't want to come back again. Maybe I've been here like 1,000 times before and I'm sick of the place. Mr. Lucas says, I think you get reincarnated, to be honest, as some other animal. That's even worse. In many cases, right? Animals, literally, it's a battle of survival from one day to the next. You've got other animals literally looking to rip them apart and eat them alive. As JR said there, imagine being a woodlouse. Yeah, to hell with that. Joe Slater says, I hear you, bro. I consider myself atheist in the sense that I lack belief in God, but I'm not hostile to religious people or the concept of God. Shout out to Jay Slater. Ayad says, imagine coming back as a deer, just pray to everything. Well, in the UK, I don't think deer have any predators, do they? I don't think deer have any predators in the UK, but they still behave as though they have predators. You know how skittish deer are even in the UK now, because for so many thousands of years, maybe millions of years, God knows how long deer have been around, but for certainly thousands of years, they've been preyed upon by other animals. So being skittish and afraid is just baked into their nature. Kylie says, if I get reincarnated as Prince Patel, I'm getting my money back. Indeed, imagine. Adrian says, reincarnated as a chicken to then only be somebody's Sunday dinner. Yeah, allow that. Danny says reincarnation would be cool. Why do you say it would be cool? If you could pick who and what you reincarnate as, and in what circumstances, maybe it would be cool. But if it's just random, then no thanks. I don't want to be part of that lottery. Harry says, what animal would you pick if you had the choice? What animal would I pick? It'd have to be an apex predator. Blue whale. No, blue whale. Well, blue whale eats krill. An orca? I don't know. Mora's man says reincarnation is literally hell on earth. Yeah, I don't like the idea of it. Jay Silver says bird of prey will be the best. Yeah, with a bird of prey, with like an apex predator bird of prey, it's only really human beings you have to worry about, isn't it? Or maybe other birds of the same species. Because, yeah, being able to fly around and go to different countries and whatnot, the freedom is incredible. No need to catch planes or swim across oceans. You just fly up in the sky and, yeah, great eyesight. You can see everything. Mr. Lucas says, being a pampered dog, maybe. I wouldn't want to be that reliant on somebody else, you know? Mr. Bean says, there is a theory that we choose this physical realm to experience what we are not, and that there are multiple other realms to experience. Well, yeah, if you look at like Eastern spiritual traditions where they have reincarnation in Hinduism and Buddhism and all that, they very much are into those types of ideas. But if I, on some level, chose to incarnate here in this world, I must hate myself then. Because why would I punish myself by sending me to this damn place? Black Dynamite says, imagine being reincarnated as Johnny Fisher's toilet. I'd rather not. Not Johnny Fisher's dad's toilet. Big John Fisher. CO9 says many people who have had an NDE now believe in the afterlife. That's a fact. I've seen interviews with people who were, highly educated atheists who scoffed at the whole idea of God and the afterlife, but after having an NDE, they became true believers. Yes, I've seen several interviews like that over the years. Extensive interviews with these people. And that's another reason that I don't ridicule people that believe in God, because some people have had profound spiritual experiences that I haven't had. So I can't sit here and tell you that they're silly for coming to the conclusion that God exists or whatever, because I haven't been in their shoes. There are some people that have literally stared death in the face and been brought, their heart stopped and whatever, like the movie Flatliners, and they've been brought back from the brink of death. I've never had an experience like that. Right? So I'm not going to ridicule people who've been through an experience like that and come back believing in God in the afterlife. Because again, like the movie Flatliners, they might know a little bit more than I do about what lies beyond, since they got to glimpse it. And I haven't. Let Me A says, what if we don't necessarily reincarnate into anything from this earth, maybe to an extraterrestrial species or even in another dimension? But what's it like there? Is it nice? It's just, you're going in blind. See, this is the problem with reincarnation for me, is you're going in blind. You don't know what you're going to be reincarnated as or under what circumstances. And I'd rather not play that lottery, TM says, what if one of the religions was right all along? Well, we'll all find out eventually. Jay Silver says, Joe Joyce will get reincarnated as a sloth 100%. Isn't he a sloth already? Al Booger says we should be careful not to mix NDEs with actually dying. Well, yeah, they didn't actually die, but they came close. And so they know a little bit more about it than we do. Or maybe that's not the right way to describe it. They've been closer to it than we have. They've been closer to it than we have. And they've perceived things related to it that we have yet to perceive. Or they've experienced things related to it that we've yet to experience. So I'm reluctant to dismiss the conclusions that they draw. I've never been close to death, Muraz Man says, I wouldn't even want to find out myself. I am religious, and even I am not averse to the idea of this life being it. It sounds good to me for there to be no afterlife. Well, if it's like, infinite bliss afterlife, sign me up. But in terms of being reincarnated into this physical reality, no thank you. One go round is enough for me. The Truth Channel says, don't people find it strange that we only talk about humans, all this God after, life, reincarnation, etc.? So does an ant come back as... Well, yeah, somebody kind of alluded to that earlier. They said, what if you don't come back as a human? What if you come back as an animal? And I think, don't quote me on this, I'm no expert on the Eastern religions, but I think that some of the Eastern religions, or it's probably not accurate to call them religions, but spiritual traditions, they do have the concept of animals reincarnating. If there's anyone who's like from India or, that part of the world in the chat, please inform us here. But as I understand it, in some of those Eastern spiritual traditions, they do have the concept of animals reincarnating and whatnot as part of a soul evolution, where you might start out as quote unquote the lowest form of life, amoeba, and then after each life, if you learn enough lessons, you'll then progress spiritually and you'll be reincarnated as a superior life form. Is that the right way to describe it? And eventually you work your way up to being a human. And then if you learn enough lessons from being reincarnated as a human, Groundhog Day style, you perfect your soul and then you reach what? Nirvana? And then you never reincarnate again? I think that's how it works, right? Correct me if I'm wrong. Adrian says, sounds like a computer game going through the levels. Indeed, but these concepts are many thousands of years old, long before video games. But yeah, it does sound like a video game going through the levels, leveling up, reaching your final form. Now, Mr. Bean says, weren't the ancient Egyptians heavily into reincarnation? Yes. It's only really the Abrahamic religions who don't believe in reincarnation. As in most people but most pagan religions are very much into reincarnation. The Eastern religions, the ancient Egyptians, the ancient Nubians. I'm not sure about the Greeks, maybe the Greeks, I don't know about the Greeks, but many, many ancient religions and even spiritual traditions today in the Far East are all very much into reincarnation. Fernie says, what are your thoughts on karma? Well, in the West, we are only aware of a very oversimplified version of karma, where basically all of your wrongs will be visited upon you. And if you do good, then the good will come back to you, right? But if you actually speak to or even watch videos about or read articles or books about like the way karma works in Hinduism and whatnot, it's way more complicated than that. In the West, we've got this oversimplified version of it. But the real stuff is way more complicated than that. The simplified version, I do not have any reason to believe in it, because I've seen many evil people in my life who've died happy without getting their comeuppance in this life. But of course, the way it apparently works is you might not get your comeuppance in this life. It might be in the next life or in a life after that. But in terms of karma in this life, that all of your bad deeds will be visited upon you in this life, no, I'm not convinced by that at all. Goozy says, I think karma is in Buddhism. It's definitely in Hinduism. I think it's in Buddhism as well. Because, those Eastern religions are not really religions. They're spiritual systems, so they're very fluid. Yeah, I think it's most accurate to call Hinduism a spiritual system. It's not really a religion. because they don't have like a central holy book with like a set doctrine in it and stuff like that. They've got a, as I understand it, a set of principles which can be applied very loosely and interpreted in different ways, and it's a very fluid thing, Hinduism, as I understand it. But yeah, I'm pretty sure they have the concept of karma in Hinduism and Buddhism. And there are other derivatives, right, of Hinduism, Buddhism. In places like Sri Lanka, they have religions which, I don't even know the names of these these religions. They're so obscure to me. TM says a Hindu once told me she'll pray anywhere, temple, church, mosque, etc. That's right, yeah, because Hinduism is very fluid. There are Hindus, for example, who will take deities from other religions and incorporate them into their own spiritual life. So apparently you'll see Hindus in India worshipping Jesus, and they're not Christians. They've just incorporated Jesus into their pantheon, if you want to call it that, of deities because they like the characteristics that Jesus embodies. So they fold that in to the other deities that they venerate as well. So they just have Jesus as one of them. Yeah, Hinduism is very fluid like that. They'll take deities from other religions and stuff, and yeah. Because in Hinduism, there's karma, and there's also something called dharma. A shout out to Danny for the super chat. He says, what's your assessment on Saturn worship? It's a very broad subject. All right, so I guess the standard alternative take on Saturn worship is that it's basically Satan worship, because Saturn and Satan sound so similar. And there are some people who, say that Islam and Judaism in particular, this is obviously a very heavy Christian perspective and heavy Christian undertone in the alternative community, particularly in places like America. And they say that, the black cube in Islam, that, people when they go to Mecca, they circle around the black cube, and also the black cube that Jews wear on their forehead. I've seen people claim that these are symbols of Saturn. Okay, because when you fold out the cube and configure it in a certain way, it makes the same shape. Is it an octagon or a hexagon or something, which is on one of the poles of Saturn? So they've come to this conclusion by, extrapolating all these things out. I'm not a member of any secret society, so I don't have any inside knowledge on these things. I'm an outsider like most other people. Not really piecing things together when it comes to stuff like that, but just entertaining different possibilities. But obviously the Romans, had their gods, which were renamed Greek gods, and the Greeks took many of their gods from the Egyptians and so on and so forth. And so Saturn is the name of a Roman god, right? Which the planet was named after. But originally that was a Greek god. If anyone in the chat is an expert or is into Greek spirituality, mythology, and stuff like that, please tell me what Saturn was called in Greek culture. Nobody's got it. But anyway, over the years, I've seen many people talk about this stuff. So, for example, I actually did an episode on Patreon, I think it was last year, in the run-up to Christmas, about Saturnalia, which was an ancient pagan festival which the Romans used to have, and other cultures, but certainly the Romans. And it was a time of revelry. This was, of course, in December. This is why Christmas happens in December, because if you go look at the Bible, all the scholars, most of the scholars will argue that Jesus was almost certainly not born in December, right? But since there is this ancient pagan Roman festival of Saturnalia, they folded in, in order to accommodate the pagans who they were converting to Christianity when Rome became Christian. In order to accommodate all the pagans, they had, the Christian celebration in line with an existing celebration, Saturnalia. Which again, Saturnalia, Saturn, and from the Abrahamic perspective, anything, thank you, Chronos. So Saturn was a renamed Greek god, which was Chronos in the Greek. Thank you. The god of time. So yeah, I've always been interested in the origins of these things, and I try and look at it from an objective viewpoint rather than through the lens of the Abrahamic religions, because again, the Abrahamic religions are of the view that anything pagan, right, anything that isn't worshiping the monotheistic God, Yahweh, Jehovah, is evil. Now, they might be right, but I'm also open to the possibility that they might be wrong. Okay? But even those of us who are not religious, right? Our perception when it comes to spiritual things, subconsciously, because our cultures have been programmed for hundreds of years to view spirituality in a particular way, we are programmed to be suspicious of pagan spirituality and to view it all as just instantly evil. So, sun worship is evil. Saturn worship is evil. Now, there might be cults and there might be groups that are evil that worship these things. But does it mean that everybody who worships these things is evil? I mean, Shout out to Mr. Luca. Good night, good night. Yes, that's right, Striker. Chronos. I couldn't remember the name of the god that Saturn. Well, Saturn and Chronos are the same god. It's just the Roman version of Chronos is called Saturn. Because obviously, Roman culture came after the Roman civilization came after the Greek civilization. I mean, they existed at the same time for a period, but, the Greek one is older. Is my chat frozen here? All right, peeps, I'm going to draw the curtain on this one. I'd like to thank each and every one of you for joining the conversation. Special shout out to everybody who donated via Super Chat. I always enjoy these night flights. We can talk about anything you guys want. This one has been enjoyable and interesting. Hope you guys have got something from it as well. So, yeah, until next time, take care, be good. I'll see you on the other side. I'm out.